If you have lots of firewalls you want to onboard to Strata Cloud Manager, this video will document and go through the process and how to do it. So what is zero touch provisioning? Well, zero touch provisioning is an automated onboarding mechanism for simplifying the onboarding process of getting firewalls onto Strata Cloud Manager. Now, using zero touch provisioning, we reduce the amount of configuration that has to be done locally. So devices could be shipped to the site and just plugged in at the remote location. Once Ethernet 1/1 is plugged in at the remote location, the firewalls will effectively dial back to the zero touch provisioning service and onboard themselves to Strata Cloud Manager. So it cuts out and reduces the manual efforts that's needed at the remote locations. And generally it just saves time. So using zero touch provisioning is a massive time saver for large scale rollouts. So I'm going to go through the process on how to use zero touch provisioning, and point out some caveats associated with it. But before I do that, I just want to see what does the documents say. So we do have documentation on zero touch provisioning, as you would expect, on our docs.paloaltonetworks.com website, and it has the step-by-step process that the tech docs has, but it does kind of then just talk about the fact that it's using Ethernet 1/1 as this onboarding interface. And then cable up Ethernet 1/1, that's going to be enabled with DHCP, and use that interface effectively as a service route to contact Strata Cloud Manager. You must keep Ethernet 1/1 connected after onboarding to continue managing on Strata Cloud Manager. So within this video that I'm going to show, we're going to kind of pick that sentence apart a little bit. And yes, we are going to keep Ethernet 1/1 connected after onboarding, but we're going to remove that requirement because maybe we have a situation that we want to use Ethernet 1/1 for another purpose. So just to point out what it says in the documentation there. Now, the steps we're going to follow are listed on the screen here. So we're going to set up our labels and our folders on Strata Cloud Manager. We're going to configure the management snippet. So the management snippet is we're going to use variables. So we're going to be able to reuse this management snippet for large amounts of firewalls. And the reason we'll have to use this is in regard to this Ethernet 1/1 switch. So when we remove the default ZTP config, we wanted to use this management interface. And the management snippet is going to contain those details. We're going to set up some onboarding rules. So we're going to tell it that we want it to associate to a particular folder, and we also want to update it to a PAN-OS version as part of the onboarding process. We will cover in the video how you actually activate at the ZTP activation page using your claim key and your serial number. We'll show on the next. We'll show in a second where we gather those details. The rest of it then, we're going to boot up the firewall, connect Ethernet 1/1. You see it then dial into Strata Cloud Manager, and then once it dials in, we will do a kind of little play around to retrieve effectively Ethernet 1/1 from the ZTP process. And the last step is probably the most important step, and it's just to draw your attention that the zero touch provisioning process doesn't update the default admin password on the firewall. So after the ZTP process is completed, either locally or over a VPN or whatever way you have to, you do have to log on to the firewall directly, and you have to update the management, the default management credentials. So probably the most important thing to take away from this video is that the default management credentials are not updated during the ZTP process and has to be updated afterwards. So there's a picture of the back of a PA440. You'll see a serial number on one side and a claim key, which is an 8-character key on the highlighted there. You're going to take these and add them into the ZTP touch provision and activation page, which its URL is stratacloudmanager.paloaltonetworks.com/ZTP device activation. Anything else? Oh yeah, on the Gen 5 hardware, we're moving. It's moved to QR code. So instead of having to manually add in, go to that URL and add in those serial number and claim key, each firewall is going to have that wrapped up in a QR code. So the user at the remote location would just scan the QR code, and it will populate those fields automatically for you. Okay, so just before we jump into the steps involved on what we need to do in Strata Cloud Manager, I thought just to kind of really spell it out what we're doing here from a cabling point of view. So with the ZTP process, we have these firewalls, we've shipped them to site. We would connect effectively Ethernet 1/1 to our switch, and our switch of course is connected to our router, and the router is connected to the internet through our ISP. Now, the ZTP service is running on Ethernet 1/1, and it will effectively dial in to Strata Cloud Manager up here in the cloud. It will dial into our SCM tenant, and it will pull down a series of configurations associated with our folders from SCM and our snippets. And so it basically gets the firewall ready to be processing traffic from a remote location by just cabling in our Ethernet 1/1 and then pulling down our folders and our snippets. Now, in its simplest form, that's what ZTP will do. Now, if you want to kind of pull back and use that Ethernet 1/1 for something else, you need to change the route that the firewall is using up to SCM by changing to a different. So we're going to cable up our management interface to our switch also, and cable the management up to the router, and use our management interface to connect up to Strata Cloud Manager instead of Ethernet 1/1. So our management interface. So that's what we're going to achieve within this video. So let's jump straight in and see what it looks like. Okay, so we're going to do the steps involved in using zero touch provisioning to onboard a firewall to Strata Cloud Manager. Now, I'm on this folder management section of Strata Cloud Manager, and you'll see I have these folders here. So I have the global, all firewalls, and the branch site. Now, my folders, I want to sit underneath the branch site, so I want the inheritance. Anything in the all firewalls will be inherited to the branch site, and then anything in the branch site is going to get inherited to my site, my local site. So I'm going to add in a folder called London, and I'm going to create a new label. Or say branches, and create a new label group. I'm going to check the boxes for ZTP, and as part of the onboarding process, I want to update the firmware. London is going to be a child of the branch site. And then I also want to create a folder to temporarily onboard the firewalls. So I'm going to call this ZTP onboarding temp folder. that will sit in the All Firewalls folder. The next thing I'm going to do is create a snippet. I'm going to call it management. This will be for the management interface settings, so my IP, default gateway, NTP, all the management services, I'm going to assign it to the same label. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some details for this management snippet. So I'm going to create a variable for the management interface because I want to be able to reuse this snippet on multiple different sites. So I'm going to pass in a wildcard holder with a default address and then update the information on the system on a per serial number basis. Each serial number is going to have a different value for branch management and branch management default gateway. Also going to give it some services, DNS and NTP. And that's it. We can move on to the next step. Moving on, we're going to now create the onboarding rules. So I'm in the All Firewalls configuration scope, and when we are in this predefined folder, we can go to Setup, click the gear cog, and it'll bring us to our device onboarding rules. So we'll go into Add and call this ZTP. I'm going to select my label, my target folder, and the target operating system. For the next step, we're going to need the serial number and the claim key, which can be found at the back of the firewalls. On the Gen 5 hardware, you will see a QR code that can be scanned, and when it's scanned, it will bring you to the ZTP activation page. On the ZTP activation page, fill it up with your tenant, your customer support portal account, populate the serial number and the claim key if you're using the Gen 4 hardware and you don't have the QR code. If you have the QR code on the Gen 5 hardware, the serial number and the claim key will be populated for you. You will select your tag that we created and go ahead and click Activate. You'll get a message up in the top if it is successful, and we can move on to the next step. If we go back to the Strata Cloud Manager and go to the settings, device management, we can see that the firewall now is in this list of cloud managed devices, but it's not shown as connected. So we're going to power up the firewall at the remote location, and I'm going to connect Ethernet 1/1, which is going to be used for the initial onboarding, and I'm also going to connect the management interface, which we will be using later to connect to the firewall. Now, after a few moments, the firewall will connect into the Strata Cloud Manager, and we'll get this update to say that the bootstrap's in progress. If you click that there after you first connected in, you'll see this status change. So if we click this, we can see what the bootstrap status is and all the checks that it's going to do as part of this process. The first part will be doing a license check. Then it'll do a content update for apps and threats and pull down the latest apps and threats from Strata Cloud Manager to the firewall. Antivirus and wildfire will follow that. The routing mode will have to change to the advanced routing engine. And the last thing that it's going to do is do a software update, which we specified in the onboarding rule. That is an optional step, but we can do it as part of this process. So we're going to follow this, and we will see how it looks as it goes through this process. So this is an example of the CSV spreadsheet that we would be importing with different values on a per serial number basis. Now what I have to do now is add in the management snippet to the folder. So I need to reference or associate the management snippet to my ZTP onboarding folder. And then what I'm going to do is go into the variables within the ZTP onboarding folder and import my CSV spreadsheet. and that was imported successfully. And if we go to the firewall level now, we can see that it has taken those values that were in my spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and push, and that push was successful. So what we're going to do now is remove the default ZTP snippet from the device level scope. So within the PA440 folder, we want to go into our configuration snippets, check the box for ZTP default, and go ahead and remove. I'll then push that configuration down. The next thing we want to do is move the firewall into the correct folder. So I'm moving it into the London folder. Now before I push this down, I need to make sure that the management snippet is included on the branch site level. So anything included in the branch site level is going to be inherited down to all the branch sites that I configure underneath it. Now I don't need to import the CSV with the variables again. The values are maintained from the earlier import. And we can see that there. So that's it. I'll go ahead and push down that configuration. Which was a success. Now, the last thing I need to do here is log on locally to the firewall. And the reason is the firewall will still have the default admin credentials. So we would need to update these credentials and commit the changes. This would have to be done locally. It cannot be done from Strata Cloud Manager. So we can go ahead and commit the changes once we are logged on to the firewall. And that commit was successful. So that completes the process. The firewall has been onboarded using ZTP and is ready to process traffic. That was it. We ran through the steps of onboarding a firewall using ZTP and pointed out some of the caravats associated with it. We also showed how to reclaim Ethernet 1/1 from the ZTP process. And just to reiterate and drill down and really kind of hammer home the point that the default admin credentials aren't updated or edited as part of the ZTP process, and don't leave that very important thing out of your checklist while using this great feature. So hopefully you found the video useful. Thank you.